Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, the podcast about myths and history. Hey, everyone, I'm Bryant, one of your hosts here, right across from Cammy, who's more than a host. She's my permanent guest. We're going to be talking about a little myth called Robin Hood, which is pretty fun, because you don't think about it sometimes like
right,
that.
it took us forever to realize it was a myth and that we should record it.
Or is it? Stay tuned to find out. So, let's hear a story, Cammy.
So I got my information from The Guest of Robin Hood, from the translation by the website sacredtext.com. One day, Little John was sent by Robin on a reconnaissance mission to Nottingham. He was looking for general news of late. Little John decided while he was milling about town to join an archery competition that the sheriff had put on. He won easily, hitting every mark and even splitting the post that they were aiming at with their arrows. The sheriff decided as a prize to this competition that he was going to hire the archer to be a servant in his house at a per year rate. And Little John agreed. I don't know what he was going to be doing at the house.
Yeah.
But he agreed because he wanted to be just the worst servant the sheriff had ever seen. Now, Little John was a huge fellow and loved to eat, but he was not allowed to have dinner until the sheriff was around. He decided after being particularly hungry to steal food from the cupboards, and one of the cooks called him and then challenged him to a duel. Both men fought hard for an hour, but neither... So they were famished by the end of it and decided to raid the cupboards together and steal... And then they stole the sheriff's gold on top of it. And then they decided to join Robin in the forest. With the food that they raided from the sheriff, John proposed that the merry men have a feast. But Robin refused to eat until the sheriff himself joined them. So Little John returned and waited on the sheriff, telling him there was a field full of deer and rabbit in the forest, and he would like to hunt them. But when they arrived at the forest, Robin and his men surrounded the sheriff and made him sit down to the meal. After they ate, Robin said he would let the sheriff go if he promised to stop pursuing the outlaws. And under pressure, the sheriff agrees. But to get back at Robin, because the sheriff didn't like to be bested, especially by these outlaws that he's been chasing for 20 plus years, he wanted to basically capture and jail him for good. The sheriff decided to host an archery contest where the prize was a golden arrow. And the news of the contest spread pretty quickly. And of course, Robin, being the best archer, couldn't resist. So he wore a hood to disguise himself and walked into town with Little John and like Will Scarlet and all his merry men and whatever. And several other men. But anyway, so at the competition, Robin's first arrow strikes true. And then they move back the mark. Second arrow, they move back the mark. Third arrow. I mean, most of the men have dropped out by this point. There's like two other guys in Robin. And he's still disguised. Like nobody knows who he is really. So they move the mark back. One of the dudes was just like a really good shot as well, and he shoots the arrow and it like hits the bullseye. And everybody's like, oh no, like nobody can win, whatever. Robin shoots and splits the arrow. Which is depicted in a lot of
so many.
Yeah. The Robin Hood stories.
Yeah.
Of course Robin wins at that point. But when he went to claim his prize, the sheriff's men surrounded him. Men were ready though, because he brought everybody.
Right.
And they drew their bows and they took aim at the guard. And many of the arrows flew, and the sheriff lost several of his men to this fight. Little John was actually wounded, but Robin took his friend and the merry men and fought their way out of the city with their arrows and their swords, and they retreated and they escaped to Sherwood Forest. Now, there are other accounts of the story where Robin doesn't even get caught, and he just takes the arrow home.
Oh.
so there's like two parts of it.
Yeah, so Robin Hood is pretty fantastical. There's a lot behind Robin Hood.
It's all like plausible though. Like a person could split an arrow.
Yep.
A person could do it's not like a...
Right. And that's so through my research, I pulled, there was some good stuff from BBC. You had a little write-up on Robin Hood at Myth Wikipedia, of course. There definitely are like records of people named like Robert. Wikipedia explains that Robin is like a diminutive form of Robert. Or, Robert and Robin are kind of related.
It's like how we say Rob today.
Yeah. And Hood kind of refers to like a hooder, someone who makes hoods. So it's pretty common.
But not someone that wears a hood.
No, or actually, it could mean that too.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah. So people named Robert Hood, Robin Hood. There's also attestations that it was Wood instead of like Hood.
Oh, because he lived in Sheriff Forest.
Exactly, and that would just might have been another way of kind of like saying like an Old English way of saying Hood as well. So there's thinking of all these different variations of the name Robin, Hood, Wood, the spellings and things like that. People with this name were arrested. I kind of told you before, like it's kind of a John Smith name situation. Maybe not as common, but it's extremely common. Robert, Robin, and things like that were very common. It's funny. There's actually records of debates since the 1300s. John of Fordon, Walter Bauer in 1440. These were like historians or authors that actually wrote about Robin Hood and whether or not he was real or not. And in some cases it's a matter of sort of like local fable gone to higher esteem, local legend that kind of went bigger. There is really no necessary proof that there was a singular Robin Hood with men who were merry in a forest. But there were a few events that kind of connected to bring out Robin Hood. There was a peasants' rebellion that occurred. There was also, this was a time when England was getting more, like law was getting more and more more encompassing, I should say, in some ways restrictive, and forest law was becoming a big thing. There wasn't really, I think that...
What is forest law?
So it's
vigilante justice kind of thing?
Think of, poaching. Like, it's to protect from poaching. It's to say that there's really no... There's no common area. There's no free land. Even though I'm not living there, this is mine. You can't kill that rabbit. The king owns everything. Exactly. Yeah. The locality principles, things like that.
Yeah, poaching was a big part. I know the beginning of Robin Hood, some stories he poaches a deer, and that's where the sheriff comes in.
Exactly. So there, with peasant revolts, with the stricter laws that we're hoping to, make the world the way it was. People were disgruntled. Stories would go, poachers were going to poach, highwaymen were going to highwaymen. So there were a few historians that talked about Robin Hood. The 1381 was the Peasants' Revolt. I totally forgot to say that. Which kind of went in some of the... That's one of some of the historical accounts of Robin Hood. But the myth had been around for a little bit. It wasn't until the 18th century where people like William Stukeley sort of brought back Robin Hood specifically as a legend.
Who is William Stukeley?
Looks like just a historian of some kind.
Okay.
Yeah, like a writer.
I didn't know if he was some famous historical person.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
It perpetuated into I think like a local myth. They were ballads. There were lots of anonymous poets and ballad makers that wrote about Robin Hood in fantastical ways. Later, once the world tried to kind of nail it down, it's really indecisive, and so it is very real. In the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries, people were talking about Robin Hood. People would have known about this figure in a legendary sense, and to them, he may have been real. I mean, the myth, that legend would have ran over 100 years' time, so people would have...
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, people would have understood that, he couldn't be around forever, but there was this idea, and so there's a few other references to highwaymen and thieves at the time even just taking on an alias of Robin Hood. So it could have been that there was the myth, there was the one guy, and then people just started calling themselves that. Because there were numerous cases in the 13th and 14th century of outlaws deliberately taking on the pseudonyms of Robin Hood and Little John, actually.
Oh wow! Scarlet or no?
No mention of that.
Because I know that's a a guy. I felt smarter because I know that.
Yeah. So it's cool. Yeah. So Robin Hood, likely not real in the way that we're thinking of the specific features of a single person named Robin Hood who did stuff, but the myth has been real for hundreds of years, since the late 13th century for sure. People were writing about Robin Hood, and there had been ballads about Robin Hood that were written long before that time as well. And it wasn't until we got to the 19th century and 18th century, especially the 19th century, where it started becoming more fantasy and fable and kids friendly. Yeah. And then, of course, once we get to the 20th century,
they took out the fight.
Exactly. One cool little note too is that there wasn't, so specifically regarding mythology, he never was really seen as a myth before. If we're thinking Herculean or even Arthurian, he never was really he was thought of as a real person when he was thought of. You can kind of think of Hercules and that and just kind of say, obviously no. But so there are some Wiccan and pagan groups that and witch cult, pagan witch culture that actually kind of like claim Robin Hood as being real. And because he was very anti-government. Mm-hmm. The government was Christian. It was clerical. It was driven, so it's sort of this anti-establishment, which means anti-Christian in a lot of ways. Due to the corruption and just the ways that it was. So it's kind of funny. There's this, there isn't evidence really supporting this, but there are claims in general that kind of bring the fableism of it to a more fantastic approach. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, I never would have thought about Robin Hood in any of these ways.
One thing that you said, the anti-Christian and or pro-paganism, I don't know, thing that you brought up. The end of his life, supposedly he was very sick. It's like some relative of his, like maybe a cousin or an aunt or something. They were a nun, and so they worked at a nunnery, and they started bleeding him because that was like a common practice. Yeah, if
you sneeze, you get blood.
Right. She purposefully bled him too much, and so he was dying. And then, I mean, the romanticism in the story is that Little John, picks him up and allows him to shoot an arrow through the window, and wherever the arrow lands, that's where Robin is buried, that sort of thing.
It landed on some poor shepherd in his neck.
And that's where he's buried too.
Yeah. Shit.
I also wanted to mention, because I didn't earlier, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. That's where we get a lot of our, like, the turn on the ballads.
I did see that name,
the more succinct version of the ballads.
Puts into literature, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
It's a pretty good read, too.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we all know Robin Hood in general, whether you saw Disney crap or
it was good. Crap. The Disney movie was so
good.
I'm
just saying crap. Okay. Yeah. What was crap was the 2018 film, though. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about that. So it had Jamie Foxx in it. He was...
Was he Robin Hood?
No.
Little John.
He was... Yes, he was. But they took a spin on it. So the dude he was in Kingsman, and then he was in Rocket Man. He portrayed that really famous dude who was Elton John. Elton John.
Oh, Elton John was
Thank you.
It.
Yeah,
okay.
I just couldn't think of Elton John's name for a minute. So it was about Elton John's life, and that actor, he portrayed Elton John in this film, and he was also in the Kingsman movies. He was Robin Hood. I should really know these actors' names other than Jamie Foxx. The sheriff was a really great British actor who was in Star Wars Rogue One. He was Director Krennic in Rogue One, and he was the sheriff of Nottingham. The movie was bad. They tried to go. So Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. is great, and if you don't think it's great, you're wrong.
Oh, it was fantastic, and
some
Benedict
people
yeah, is that his name?
He was wrong.
He was very wrong.
Right.
I'm still mad at him.
Yeah. So this Robin Hood was bad because it tried to be serious, like Sherlock Holmes, but it was like fantastical. Like it was, so in this one, Robin Hood's like, he's off doing a crusade, helping out, similar to was it Kevin Costner and Morgan Freeman that did the old one?
Yeah.
So it was,
or is that Dances with Wolves?
You take your pick. He's off doing a crusade, and he's basically was enlisted to do that. And oh my God, they're going through the streets of Damascus or Acre or wherever they are, and they're holding their bows and arrows like they're a SWAT team. Like they're checking their corners, and they're like going around, and they're like clear. I mean, it literally looked like a training video for like a 2019 SWAT team, but with bows and arrows in the year like 1200, and it was so bad. And the sheriff of Nottingham looked like Director Krennic from Star Wars. Like he had like leathery, like matrixy uniform. It was so bad. It was dumb.
You know what other Robin Hood movie doesn't hold up is Robin Hood Men in Tights, and you can say what you want about that movie, but if you watch it today, you're going to be really disappointed.
I bet, yeah. Okay, I could see that.
None of it's funny. It's all really misogynistic and...
Sure. Yeah, that time
It's a product of its time, and I remember laughing when I first watched it. Yeah. But now when you watch it, it's...
That's interesting.
What is this? Yeah.
Excellent. Well, nice. That was a solid... So we'll catch you next time.